And today, President Obama saying the U.S. is investigating whether chemical weapons have been used in Syria. Now, we asked Senator Lindsey Graham if the U.S. should be doing anything else in Syria. Troops on the ground in Syria. You think it's time?
The day after Assad leaves, the biggest fear I have is where do the chemical weapons go? Remember what happened in Libya? All these weapons are all over the Mideast. What I'm saying is that when Assad falls, we need an international coalition, and we'll be part of it, to secure the 10 or 12 weapon sites that have chemical weapons. If we don't control their weapons, those chemical weapons, we're going to be in real trouble down the road.
We have the country, I think many have war fatigue.
Yeah.
And so when you raise the thought of boots on the ground in Syria, I think most people, I think chills go up their spine.
I totally get it, but here's what I hope we're not tired of: defending ourselves against weapons of mass destruction. There's no doubt chemical weapons exist in abundance in Syria. The question for the American people and the world at large: who gets those weapons when Assad falls? Radical Islamists, or do we control them to make sure they don't get in the bad guys' hands to attack us or Israel, the whole region in general? I'm sorry the war has gone on so long. I'm sorry the Arab Spring is breaking apart, but we live in a world that's very dangerous, and I owe it to the people of South Carolina and the public at large to say, you're war weary, but trust me, if we let these weapons get into radical Islamist hands, we'll pay a price. And the good news is we can secure them with a very small footprint, and it should be an international footprint, just not an American footprint.
What do you think what President Obama has said, at least today in Israel, about what's going on in Syria?
I think President Obama has mishandled Syria. How would the what makes you believe the Iranians believe we're serious about stopping their nuclear program when Assad has killed 70,000 of his own people? President Obama has changed the red line with Syria 3 different times. I think they did use chemical weapons. And President Obama,
in this recent discussion?
Yes, I really believe the facts are going to be borne out that a chemical attack was committed by the Assad regime, and President Obama says, don't go down that road. Well, you know, what do we do about it if they did? The president's policies in the Mideast, from Benghazi to Syria to Iraq, now Iran, are failing. The region's on fire, and if I were Israel, I'd want to trust but verify when it came to Barack Obama.
You raised the Benghazi,
right.
And you've been pushing that issue for quite some time. Tell me, what's your next step?
We're finally getting people to come forward and talk. They're afraid to come forward. A lot of them still work for the government. I want the families to know what happened that night. I want the American people to know what happened on the ground. Look what we've learned by pushing. Susan Rice's story, this was a spontaneous event caused by a hateful video, has crumbled. I want to know what happened that night. Did they ask for help? Who did they ask from? Why was no help provided?
But well, you can ask the survivors or the people who are there, to the extent that you get to know them, and that's been an issue, or get their names. But the House of Representatives, your party is in the majority, and for whatever reason hasn't issued subpoenas for that information. They could issue subpoenas and demand people come before hearings.
I believe the attitude of the House leadership is changing when it comes to Benghazi. They're going to be more aggressive. But you make a good point. I've written CIA Director Brennan, Secretary of State John Kerry, provide the names of the survivors to the Congress in an appropriate way so we can interview them about what actually happened. The story told by the White House after the attack has not held water.
But everybody writes letters in this town. Letters never get answered unless you're in the majority party, not in the majority party.
Now, there you go. And my Democratic colleagues in the Senate have shown no interest in getting to the bottom of Benghazi. If this were Bush, they'd be all over it. The one thing Republicans can do is use the leverage they have in the House to subpoena these survivors, so we'll find out what happened that night. I guarantee you there are people wanting to talk but are afraid to talk, and a subpoena would make the difference.
Are you going to do anything about it? Encourage the House at all to do that?
I'm going to meet with the House leadership tomorrow, hoping that they will take up the Benghazi cause. Look how far we've come from what the story was told by Susan Rice. Look at what we found out by pushing it on this show and other shows, CBS and mainly Fox. The whole scenario told by the president and Susan Rice has just absolutely collapsed.
Why hasn't the House leadership?
I have no idea.
No, why the Republican House leadership hasn't been...
To my House colleagues, please, for God's sake, step up your game when it comes to Benghazi. You have tools that I don't have as a senator because I'm in a minority party. Unfortunately, Harry Reid hasn't lifted a finger really to push the administration. Look what we did on Iraq. Look what we did on interrogation techniques gone bad under the Bush administration. The Democratic Senate's given this president a pass when it comes to Benghazi. The House cannot give him a pass.
Are you going to tell Speaker Boehner to to push for subpoenas?
I think Speaker Boehner is very much in the mindset of trying to get to the bottom of Benghazi. But yes, I will urge Speaker Boehner to use the powers of the House, not to chase rabbits, but get to the bottom line. We have not heard from the people who lived through this debacle, who were there on the ground. And I guarantee if it had been a good news story, we'd have heard from them the next day. The fact that we haven't heard from them for 6 months should make every American worried about what this administration is covering up.